todos a una nueva emisión de Liceo Radio. En el programa de hoy trataremos un tema de gran actualidad en el Liceo Europeo, como lo es el Bachillerato Internacional. Como ya sabréis, desde mayo el Liceo Europeo es colegio autorizado para impartir el programa Diploma de Bachillerato Internacional y estamos en proceso de autorización para impartir el programa de años intermedios y de educación primaria. El Bachillerato Internacional es una fundación educativa sin ánimo de lucro, fundada en 1968, que actualmente colabora con 3.681 colegios, si no me equivoco, alrededor de unos 146 países. La meta de esta organización es, sin duda alguna, intentar conseguir formar adolescentes, jóvenes solidarios, que sepan o intenten descubrir informados y ávidos de conocimientos capaces de crear un mundo mejor y más pacífico. En pos de este objetivo, dicha organización colabora con establecimientos escolares, gobiernos y organizaciones internacionales para crear y desarrollar un programa de educación internacional muy exigente y con unos métodos de evaluación rigurosos. Por ello, hoy tenemos el inmenso honor de recibir en el Liceo Europeo a tres grandes personalidades, tres de los directivos de esta organización. Ellos son Mr. Adrian Kearney, director de la región ID de África, Europa y Oriente Medio, Mr. Richard Henry, director de desarrollo de la región ID de África, Europa y Oriente Medio, y doña Marité Menéndez, responsable de Bachillerato Internacional en las oficinas de Madrid, en España. En unos segundos retomamos el programa y damos paso a la entrevista. Bien, regresamos, ya se encuentran con nosotros nuestros invitados, a los que damos la bienvenida. Buenos días. Hello, good morning, welcome to Liceo Europeo. It's a great pleasure for us to receive you, and we appreciate so much you have found a day to dedicate to our school. También damos la bienvenida, por supuesto, ha venido a visitarnos el concejal don Fernando Martínez Rodríguez, concejal de Educación y Deporte de Alcobendas. Hola, buenos días.
Hola, buenos días.
Y por supuesto tenemos aquí dos profesores del liceo de inglés, Marcus y Dave, que van a llevar la entrevista íntegramente en inglés. Bueno, antes de nada, don Fernando, ¿y qué opina usted para abrir la entrevista?
Pues me parece un proyecto interesantísimo, que además, como siempre, el Liceo Europeo está en vanguardia con estos temas, con el inglés, que es una herramienta fundamental y bueno, el que se trabaje y que haya sido autorizado este colegio para impartir estas enseñanzas, pues yo creo que una vez más eleva el nivel académico del centro y es un orgullo para la ciudad de Alcobendas contar con un colegio que lleva a cabo este programa tan ambicioso.
Thank you, Blanca. Firstly, I'd like to thank you again for being here today. Liceo Europeo, as you know, offers the diploma program and soon to be followed by the middle years program and the primary years program, because we firmly believe in the IB philosophy and core values. So my first question actually relates to the core values. The IB mission statement refers to the development of compassionate learners. With international political and economic leaders constantly pushing the need for competitiveness above everything else, how can we marry these apparently contrasting ideas?
I think, first of all, I want to say how pleased I am to be here at the school, and I'm delighted to be, having the opportunity to discuss things through radio. Because radio, for me, I remember being a young boy, and I was 7 or 8, and my grandfather gave me a small radio. And I used to, at night, I'd be listening to the radio, and I would be tuning in to radio broadcasts all across Europe. So there I was in a small northern town listening to French, to German, to Spanish, to all these, and just thinking about all those people out there and those different cultures and how to kind of embrace it. So for me, radio was a way of just sort of opening up my mind and thinking the whole other kind of realities out there. So when you think about the International Baccalaureate, we heard earlier about the number of schools and the number of countries, but it's 1 million learners. So I think when you think about a global community of teaching and learning, then the IB is really quite significant in terms of that sharing. But when we're thinking about, I suppose, thinking about the importance of learners, what we're trying to balance is strong academic performance with other attributes as well. So you're thinking about what does an IB education bring? It's trying to create learners which are active, compassionate, lifelong learners with a curriculum that is holistic in nature. And I think where you can see challenges in the world, political challenges and so forth, in a way, those are the contexts where an IB education is needed. So we in different parts of the world, I mean, I'm working across Africa, Europe, the Middle East with Richard and with the team. So trying to ensure that we're working with the right type of organisations for long-term sustainable good. So we're trying to build up that wider kind of community.
Excellent. Thank you. In this, the school firmly believes as well in the importance of technology. We have an I class, and technology is one of the big bases on which you're built. In some of your documents, the Vision 2020 document, for example, you refer as well to the importance of developing future technologies. So the question is, with the advent of new technologies likely to bring about the greatest changes in education that we've seen for maybe a century, if not more, you are offering now online courses, and a lot of American universities are doing so. How do you see the future of education developing in decades to come?
I'll take that one. Can I say as well, thank you very much for having us here today. This is my second time to the school. I think it was about 18 months ago now that your splendid leadership team was looking towards the future and talking about whether to become an IB World School, and it's wonderful to see the progress that's happened since that time. So it's definitely a pleasure to be here. We recently hosted an event actually just before our regional conference, which was for higher education institutions, admissions officers and school counsellors. And we had a panel at the end of the day, which was what will higher education look like in 2023? And it was quite an interesting discussion. It wasn't so much around what would the technologies look like, it was more how are we using them, and how will we be prepared for them? Because the reality is, in 10 years' time, we don't actually know what the technologies will be. But we know that the students in our schools now need to be prepared to be flexible, to be able to adapt to whatever new technologies that they will be engaging with, but also the careers that will follow on from that don't exist right now, but could possibly in 10 to 20 years be careers that they're working in. And I think that's where the IB really does have a focus in terms of the pedagogical approach, has been for quite some time and will continue to be, not about the teacher providing the knowledge, not about the teacher being the source of knowledge and standing at the front of the class and the chalk and talk approach that's been mentioned before, but it's very much about the student being at the centre, the student engaging with their learning experience, and not only understanding what it is that they're learning, but why. Why are they learning about this, and how does it fit into the bigger picture? And I think particularly using the example of theory of knowledge in the diploma program, where the students are really encouraged to challenge their thinking, challenge what they're learning, and ask those questions. Why? Why is this important to me, and why is it important to my community and the world? So that's where I think we can make sure that we're preparing students no matter which way the technology moves in the future. It's that adaptability, but also the questioning that we want students to embed really in everything they do.
If I can just sort of add to what Richard's saying, because you were asking about the IB has online courses available for the diploma program, principally to offer schools choice. So for example, you may have 2 or 3 students that want to do a very specialised course. You don't have a teacher available, so it can provide it online. I think we cannot underestimate the role of the teacher and good teaching practice. So there's huge amounts of work in terms of, as you know, in terms of the professional development. And if you look at the online courses which are available through Umoja Education, then it's actually a very heavily tutored environment. It's not like doing an online test. So there's a tremendous amount of interaction between the tutor and the student, a lot of guidance, the sharing work, and actually the students who are in those courses are part of what we're trying to establish as global classrooms. So there are students across the world studying within a global kind of, within an online environment, but the tutoring hours and the time spent is really significant. So we, as I say, we can't underestimate the importance of good teaching the teacher who can make those students burn, you know, be with enthusiasm and help to empower the students to take forward the attributes we discussed earlier.
Also, to add on Adrian, you may want to explain also our initiative with the UK government in terms of the use of technology to help the curriculum development of mathematics.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and it's what's termed, you know, inverted commas, a kind of first world problem in terms of the lack of ability in terms of mathematics. So we see this particularly in sort of, if you look at education, North America, the UK and Australia, then the number of students which are graduating with good mathematics performance from school is actually very, very low. There's been a whole debate around STEM education, science, technology, English and mathematics, and that link between strong mathematics performance and strong economic performance. So we have a project with the UK government to provide national access to the IB Mathematical Studies course through an online environment. So really it's helping the government support learners after 16 to continue in their math studies, because they know solid math is a very good foundation for employability and as a life skill.
Well, I want to get back to that in a moment, but before we do, I do have a follow-up question about technology. It's maybe a little bit more general than some of the other questions. What I'd like to ask you is, obviously technology isn't going anywhere. It's here in our daily lives, it's in the classroom. My question is, do you see it working today more to widen the gap between the haves and have-nots in terms of our young people? Or do you see it as a tool of the future to help close that gap? And what can we do to...
Well, it's a really, really interesting question, and saying that we have responsibility for Africa, Europe and the Middle East. So in which context do you want to ask that question in terms of the role of technology? And really, what technology you're speaking of? I mean, if I look at schools in Africa, you might be paying $20,000 per year to get reliable electricity. And then they'll pay a similar amount of money on top for kind of internet. But there are lots of innovations where you can use dongles and USB keys. So we've done, for example, professional development courses in Southern Africa, in areas with limited connectivity and things, where they basically had the course material on a USB key, they've worked on the course, they've done their assignments, and then they've uploaded it when they've had the connection. And the other thing is, in terms of Africa, and would be the use of mobile technology. So lots of people have got good mobile phones. So in a way, these are lots of challenges about how do we interact with those things. So the technology can play a role, but we need to work with other organisations to help bridge that gap. And it all can also, I suppose a plug and an interest will be around students with special educational needs. So there's a big point about how technology can support inclusiveness. And if you've got students with special needs in a kind of normal kind of class, the way that technology can be something which is good for some can be good for all of the students. So technology can be really helpful if it's done in an inclusive way.
Actually, just to continue also on the comment you made just a bit ago, many countries, or some countries today, seem to be moving towards strengthening the more traditional values and methods of evaluation. Read recently that the GCSEs are probably going to be brought back into Britain. They're going to be scrapped for the O-levels, rather. And I talked to many of my peers in the United States, where I was born, and many of the teachers there are frustrated that the pendulum has gone too far. So whereas here in Spain, we have a strong desire to try to maybe take some of the advances in America about critical thinking and teaching beyond memorization, and at the same time I see a lot of people in the United States frustrated that maybe they've gone too far. And so part of my question maybe is, how do we find this balance?
Yeah, if you go back to GCSEs in the UK, so I think that there is a strong move that I see in many countries to go back to mathematics and science and what would be the more seen as being the tougher subjects, and understanding the importance of those subjects is fundamental to a kind of broader curriculum. If you take, in the UK, they are introducing performance measures for schools. So, okay, what makes a good school? One of the measures would be how many students are completing a combination of science, arts and languages. So in fact, they're looking to the IB and the baccalaureate sort of approach, and then saying, well, how can we make that work within our kind of system? So it's striking something of a balance. I mean, I suppose from an IB perspective, it's strong academic rigor, but actually you've got to have the international mindedness, the critical thinking and the sensitivity to foster the right type of creativity for life. And then you've got something when they go into university and go into wider life, which is that you're sowing the seeds for much longer term success. It's an interesting question because we're talking really about access. Okay, so what type of schools, what type of learners are accessing an IB education? So if you take that community of 1 million learners, of that 1 million learners, more than 50% of the IB schools in the world are state funded. And you start to think about, well, which schools are selective and which schools are non-selective. And one of the most recent initiatives really has been the IB thinking about access for vocational streams of education. So people who've got a more vocational direct path into, they might want to work in business, into retail or hotel, or might want to work within the sports industry. So we've developed a qualification, the IB Career Related Certificate, which is, and I think this is an important information really, is an important project really in terms of a route through to employability. And it combines a unique core of studies. There's the approaches to learning, the critical thinking you'd expect to see, the focus on the language, and there's a reflective project which might be to do with the ethics and work in terms of their vocational study and the academic, which bridges the two disciplines. So students are studying 2 diploma courses, they're doing that core group of studies which is giving them the right kind of attributes, and then they'll be doing a nationally recognised vocational qualification. So this is recently launched and building within the UK and the Middle East, and we kind of see potential in Spain as well. So it's those links that are going to be important as they go into national vocational training. We work with employers, we work with the right type of universities. So, and it's different type of access. So
it may be interesting for the listeners to know that the process that we go through in reviewing any DP, the diploma program course material, it's actually a 7-year cycle. And that, you might think, 7 years, goodness, why does it take so long? But as Adrian mentioned, it's bringing in the university representatives, business representatives, talking to the wider community and saying to them, what is it that you want? What are the skills, the attitudes that you see are important, so that when you do have the students leaving school and moving on to university or into the workplace, they're engaged, they're ready to participate proactively, and that's where it comes through, definitely in the learner profile. We just had a major review of the learner profile, and it was interesting that out of that, very little changed. The 10 key attributes pretty much remain the same, and that critical thinking, communication, those key attributes, characteristics still hold true. But it's very much part of our process is to continue to review, go back, are we doing the best we can in terms of developing the programs so that the students can have those skills for the future.
Well, Marcos and I could probably spend hours and hours asking you questions, but the center of any school obviously is the students, and right now we'd like to take the opportunity. We have a couple of 4th graders with us. Lucia and Irene would like to ask a few questions.
Is there any difference between a student from Spain and a student from other countries?
Wow, what a question.
You asked the best questions. Is there any difference? Well, we have such a profile of kind of learners across the world and across the region. So, you've got people of different socioeconomic groups, the type of schools that they're in. They might be state funded, they might be private, the language background, the profile of studies that they will do. But I think, you could say what makes, so when I travel a lot, so, you could say, well, I come to schools like this and see good quality schools like this in many parts of the region, and you see a lot of similarities. And then we have projects, for example, state school projects in the kind of outposts of Russia or Kazakhstan or really remote places where they're facing different challenges or they're facing a very strong national kind of context. So it's quite different. But what joins you up, okay, what unites and creates the community is we have a common mission in the IB to try and make the world a better place for education, and then those things in terms of the learner profile. that we're working together, all of those schools and learners. We're trying to be, caring, thoughtful, good communicators, critical thinking, all of those aspects kind of coming together. So there's lots that join you. But when we work in Africa, Europe and Middle East, so we've got schools in 84 countries, right? Just in this region, 84 countries. You think about the language, you think about the requirements and everything else. So it's the diversity, it's the difference. So it's the cultural diversity, the linguistic diversity that makes it so rich. So when we come together in a conference, when the teachers come together and we bring people together, it's such a rich engagement. So you've got some things where you've got commonality and you're part of a global community, but what makes you special here in Spain needs to keep you special because that's really unique. So we need to keep the two things together.
If I can add to that, Adrian touched on it in terms of different places he's lived and worked, and I've lived in Indonesia for 11 years. Do you know where Indonesia is? Heard of Bali?
Yes.
Most people know Bali. So and in that school, there were Muslim students, Christian students, Hindu, Buddhist, and we were able to learn about each other and our backgrounds, the religious backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. And one thing I found out that I know for sure is that there is more that's common about us than there is different. And that's something that I feel very confident that the IB promotes that, promotes an understanding of our commonality, but also recognise that there are differences, but be able to respect those differences. Probably the only other thing I would say in terms of what's different about a student from Spain is that your country has the World Cup in football right now.
Is we are even different inside of Spain. We have many different regions, and so we are all different, but we try to tolerate each other, understand each other, cooperate with each other, and our mission to create a better world altogether. And you have an important role when you grow up, to contribute to that.
What are the advantages of studying in the IB?
What are the
Advantages.
advantages of studying in the IB?
Question two.
I think we would, one advantage would be that we would hope as a learner in the classroom that you feel like you've come in today and you guys are asking questions, right? And that's the route to learning. Okay, so a big part of the IB philosophy is that students like yourselves are thinking that they're working through problems, they're asking questions, they're doing group work, and they're working with their teachers through things. So we think that rather than the teacher stand at the front of the class and say, these are the 10 things, write these down, learn them, I'll test you, that you're actually thinking, asking questions to find out knowledge. And we think that that approach, from your age all the way through, will give you a big advantage of life, as well as linking you with other students and being a good pathway to university. I don't know if you haven't worked out what you want to do yet, but whatever you want to do, having good questions, asking good questions is the right way to learn. That's the right way to understand what's right, what isn't, and what will work for you.
Thank you, girls.
Thank you.
Now we have two more students. We have two 6th graders. We have Manuel and Allegra, and they also have some questions for you.
Hi.
My question is, if I had to go to another country to study, being in the middle years program, how would the IB help me?
I think when if you weren't studying the IB, okay, let's take the other hypothesis. Okay, imagine you're not studying the IB and then you transfer to another country. What would happen is you'd have to go into the national education system, right? So you've been following a track of education, you go into another country and you have to change systems completely. So you may find that, for example, some of the topics that you're going to do in the new system you've already done before. Some things are easier, they're difficult, different, etc. So you'd have like a dislocation in your learning. So one of the things that joins up the MYP and the IB schools across the world is they're following a similar sort of framework, so that you can move into an IB school in another country and kind of slot in and have an education and a philosophy of education which fits with what you've done before, but is also locally appropriate. So I think that's a big power of it. Mm-hmm.
Yes, my children has actually gone into different countries in IB schools, and they were very keen on continuing with their IB learner profile, and their IB students that we never even thought about looking for another school was not IB. And it was not my decision, it was their decision to continue on their education. They were very happy and they wanted to continue the same way of thinking, the same way of creating things, inquiring, doing the same methodology and the same pedagogy that the IB gets across.
Manuel, did you want to ask a question?
How does the middle year program connect with the diploma program?
How does the middle years program
Connect with the diploma program?
connect?
Yeah.
That's a very good question.
Go on, Richard.
We've been asked that question a lot. Well, we have something which we call the continuum. Do you know continue, that word?
Yes.
So you stretch it out, continuum. It's basically looking at what happens between the primary years, the middle years, and our diploma program, or even the IBCC, a new program we have. And it's looking at what are the common threads, what are the things that run through those programs that are essential, that we think are essential. So we mentioned the learner profile. We have something which is called, you would know, approaches to learning. Do you know about that? Different ways that you can learn. There's also areas of interaction. Have you learnt about that? So these are the overarching themes within the middle years program, that those skills, as well as the attitudes of the learner profile, they are designed to prepare you for the diploma program. So not only is there content, you need to know that 2 + 2 = 4. But on top of that, there's the layer of the attitudes towards your learning, but also the skills. And it's those that we have as part of what we call the continuum of learning.
Okay. Thank you, Manuel. Thank you, Allegra. And I'd like to introduce two of our secondary students, Beatriz and Daniel. Hi, Beatriz.
Hello.
I don't know.
You would like to go first?
I will. What is the purpose of doing a project at the end of each program?
So we have primary years, we finish with the exhibition. Middle years, we have the personal project. And then of course in the diploma it's the extended essay. And you'll find that as we go through each of those, they're like stepping stones. So the exhibition is run where a group of students, can be an individual, but often it's a group, and they're learning really those skills of research, being able to work together to prepare information so they can present and exhibit. And it's a culmination activity of what they have been learning. Again, not focused just on the content of what they have learned. They get to dive in a little bit more deeply into that content of that subject, but it's really exhibiting the skills that students have been learning. Then of course the personal project becomes just that, it's more personal. You go in a little bit further, and hopefully you also engage with a community service-based type activity. Have you done anything like that?
No, but I know what it is.
Okay, good. And then of course the extended essay is a fantastic opportunity to really dive deeply into a specific subject matter that connects with your learning, so that you can then, at those 3 projects, as you go through the school life, you then have the skills to take that on to university, where a lot of your work there will be research based. It will be you have to set your own timelines, you have to make sure that you have some sort of overarching plan of how you're preparing this material, and then how you present it and how you're able to communicate that. And we hope that those skills are not just important for you at university, but you continue to use them for the rest of your life. So for us, those culminating projects at the end of each program are incredibly important.
What skills would you say the IB develops the most in students?
Well, I think it develops strong, rigorous academic achievements. I think our objective is to create active, compassionate, lifelong learners. And if anything else, that's what we want to sort of really try and achieve, really. And I think when there's research from universities that show how much better IB students perform at university. And we've seen this, for example, in the UK, where IB diploma graduates are more likely to get into more difficult disciplines, more likely to get a better degree, go on to further studies. So we see that impact. To give you an example, we at a conference we had the head of admissions from MIT in the US, and he was talking to heads of school, IB schools across the world at a conference, and he was saying, "We love your students because they make such a difference. Not only are they academically strong, but they make a difference to the life of the university." And I think that's what we see. And I think the other thing is you look at the IB alumni, and we haven't spoken enough. I mean, it's the students in the school and the alumni, and the IB is 45 years old. There was an event in Finland. We've got a lot of state schools in Finland, and Finland's performs really well in terms of PISA. So at this event, the two IB alumni stand up. So one is male, and he stands up and said, "Okay, I did the IB diploma. I work for McKinsey. I'm a McKinsey consultant, and when I talk to people in my office, 30% of them have done the IB diploma." Okay, so it gets you into McKinsey. And then on the other side, a woman stands up and she said, "I did the IB diploma. I am a journalist and I'm a war correspondent in Afghanistan. This is what I do." And I think the IB spans both those types of student reality.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel.
And I had just one more question, which is, how does the IB develop in, you may call them, less open-minded countries?
In less open-minded countries, it's we were kind of talking about this a little earlier, it's trying to work with, in less open-minded countries, we try and work with the partners which want to make it more open-minded. So it's trying to work with the foundations, with the agencies. So if we start with schools and new schools, it's really important for us that the head of school in particular, but the teachers, but the head of school want to change and they want to make that transformation. So a big part of our work, you talk about economic or geographic sustainability in education. So we want to ensure that it's kind of properly embedded. So we're quite careful who we work with, and when schools apply, they have to spend a lot of time saying, how does the school relate to the IB mission and how are they going to make that a reality? So it's a philosophical question, but it's a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Beatriz. And now we have students who are currently studying the IB diploma program. So we have Lucia, Maria, and Rodrigo.
I think we might just have time for one question, Bruce.
Yeah, one question per student.
Oh, okay.
So, Lucia, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. So, as they said, I'm Lucia.
Hi.
Hello. And so, it is my belief that many universities take greater knowledge of the CAS hours rather than looking at the high grades. So, what is your opinion on that? And if it's so important, is it then logical that it only counts for 1 point?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting question. The admissions policies of universities vary from country to country. And what we're seeing, for example, in the UK is that the top universities, if you take Oxford as an example, or Leeds, or King's in London, what they're now doing is they're actually reducing their offer in terms of the number of diploma points they want because they understand these students perform better. So I think when, for example, if you're going into a top university, you'll have the academic aspect of what you're doing and you'll have an interview. Okay, and earlier we talked about the extended essay and we talked about creativity, action, and service. So what they want to know is, what's your DNA? What makes you tick? What makes you think? What are you really like as an individual? And you're going to be successful in the university. So with an IB education, through the work, for example, in the extended essay, in the interview you can talk in depth about an academic area that you've researched, and in terms of creativity and action and service, I mean, the work you've done at community level is really saying these are the other things which are socially important to me. And those are things which the universities will tend to say, you know, where you've got lots of people applying for a course, those are things that universities will value. We see this in the
So, is it worth 1 point, or is it actually worth a lot more than that?
I feel like, I mean, they value it for 1 point.
No, but it's a point on our scale. But as Adrian says, when you sit down for that interview, the value that you bring to the table is actually a lot more than any points that you could allocate to it.
You know, the universities generally, they want more than a transactional relationship with the student. The top ones, the ones that really want to kind of push, they want a kind of deeper engagement. You say, well, it's 1 point, but in terms of what you bring with that 1 point, it's, I mean, when I think about standard state schools in other countries, they just don't do that type of work. So it's a different type of thinking, actually, and you're engaging different problems, and you're taking responsibility in areas at a younger age.
Okay, so my name is Maria, and I would like to know the reason why, if physical education and sport promotes many of the values listed in the IB program, such as teamwork, being a risk taker, and being a balanced person, why isn't it part of this educational system?
I think there's a point here that I'd probably like to see a bit more emphasis on sport. I mean, sport is certainly part of the curriculum, we work. The IB works with the International Paralympic Committee, so we actually have a global project. We're piloting flexibility in the diploma for high-performing student athletes, and this is something which is just really starting. So you think about dual career students. So, you know, you're a high-performing athlete, you're doing competition, you're doing sport, and you also need to do your studies. So we have a global project with an organisation called the World Academy of Sport, which is part of the International Paralympic Committee, which does the training of like the International Basketball Foundation and skiing and all that sort of thing. So it's really, how do we create athlete-friendly education centres that balance sport and the demands of high-performance sport with education. So I was at a meeting a little while ago, and one of the Olympic winners, Frankie Fredericks, he was a sprinter. If you look him up, Frankie Fredericks is a guy, and he's just saying, what I did was, I finished my sporting career, but I hadn't done enough education. What do I do next? So what we're trying to do is ensure that the students go forward, if they're talented in sport, they can balance the two things. So that's a project we're working on.
There's also a newly developed course in the diploma program designed around physical education, but also the theory behind it. And of course the action component of CAS is around any sort of physical activity. It usually is sport, but it could be anything in terms of organising hiking trips and things like that. So very much it is valued by the IB to have some sort of physical activity, because you need that balance in your life.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, my name is Rodrigo, as they said. I wanted to ask you, I have read that the dictator of North Korea studied the IB program. And the second history paper tends to have questions about dictators such as Stalin or Hitler. I cannot help but ask what do you think Kim Jong-un thinks of that paper right now that he's become a dictator.
It's like a really profound last question. you cannot. I would say that there is. For a successful education, to achieve what we're trying to achieve in terms of making the world a better place, there's a shared responsibility. Okay? The responsibility is shared by the IB in terms of the curriculum and the philosophy and everything else, the schools, okay, and the linkage between the IB and the schools, the pedagogy, how they're working, and then the learner, the individual, right? If all three of those aspects are working together, then you get the good impact. But we're not brainwashing people. I mean, if the learner ultimately is not engaging with the philosophy and the principles, then they're not. And the IB is not, as I say, it's not a guarantee. If there is shared responsibility, so we expect the learner to come to us to engage with the attributes and try and practice it. So that would be my response.
And to add to that, I would hope, in most cases, what you're learning at home is also very much the foundation of the fibres of who you are, and your family beliefs, your family background is incredibly important. And the IB, as Adrian said, we don't come in trying to convince people, no, you need to do this. It's a framework in which we provide a vehicle, if you like, a conduit to allow people to think about their learning. But we don't tell people what they should be thinking. There's a difference there.
Well, thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Lucia. Well, that's all we have time for today. We would like to thank you again. It's been a great honour to have you here, and we've had some really interesting questions and answers. And so on behalf of the school, thank you once again, and over to you, Blanca.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. Muchas gracias a los alumnos que nos han acompañado hoy, a Marcus y a Dave, por supuesto, al concejal don Fernando Martínez, a ver si le vemos más a menudo por aquí, y a nuestros invitados de honor. Thank you very much for being here. We are very grateful for your visit, and I hope you have a pleasant time.
Thank you very much to you and the school.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Gracias.
Y a vosotros, oyentes del Liceo Radio, gracias por habernos sintonizado y hasta el próximo programa.